fortnightly basis, in which we try to come up with a topic, and in this topic we try to contextualize some theories, and we try to basically disentangle what the theorists have said, and we try to link it with our understanding, our study of literature. I hope that this seminar that is being conducted by our very own Professor Rauf Tahir, who is also my teacher, probably goes back for like 12 years now, 12 or 13 years. This would be enlightening for us all, and now let us start the seminar formally. Thank you so much for your agreement to talk with us, sir. I also welcome another teacher of mine, Sir Sameer Farooqi, who is the principal of Farooqi Grammar School, Farooqi School Network. I completed my matriculation from Farooqi School, and thereby my relation with Sir Sameer also goes back like 15 or 17 years now. So I welcome you too, sir. Now over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction, and I welcome you all to what I hope is going to be quite a brief discussion, although I'm not all that popular for keeping my promises, but yes, I will try to keep it brief. At the very outset, let me introduce Sir Sameer a little further. Most of you actually know him, but he has been with me for the last 33 years or so. We got together when we were like 17 in Government College Lahore, and the commonality between us, the common interest that we both have, is that we love literature. And let me tell you, he has read out to me hundreds of novels. And when I talked to him about assisting me with reading aloud some of the quotations that I have gathered, he voluntarily said that he'll come along, and I'm thankful to him for that. Now, jumping straight into it, I'm going to talk about disability theory and the way it can be used as a tool to analyze literature. So the first question naturally is as to what is disability theory. So I would answer this question by situating this theory in its proper critical zone. In other words, I would start off by sharing as to which group does this theory belong. As it is, this theory belongs to a bunch of theories that are known identity-based theories. Identity-based theories. What are identity-based theories? These theories draw their critical impetus through the processes of identity reclamation on the basis of physical difference. So what do I mean from that? These theories try to get back what according to them is a lost identity that is based upon physical difference. A few examples might clarify this point a little further. Now, for example, gender, a physical difference, of course, gave us feminist theory. They talked about the rights of women and saw patriarchal structures as the opposite number, as the oppressing group. Skin color, gave us critical race theory, another physical attribute, and post-colonial theories to a great degree. And here again, the oppressor group was considered to be the white people, and the oppressed one were the people with the colored skin. Sexual orientation, another physical attribute, gave us queer studies. And we know the binaries there as well. In the same way as can be gauged from its very name, disability studies. Now, the sensory impairments and physical handicaps gave us disability studies. Because here again the claim was that there was a group, namely people with disabilities, and I would now from here on call it PWD because that will be repeated over and over again. And I would also mean person with difficulty from the same abbreviation, and you would be able to configure my meaning through the context of my sentence. So here again the claim was that the PWD are the obsessed group. And who is the oppressor? Now here things get very interesting. The oppressor is the forces that get mobilized under the umbrella of ableism. Okay? Now ableism does not seek to be identified through any skin color, to any gender, or to any sexual orientation. It actually cuts across all the categories. So this is one such thing, that is an identity-based theory. What does this theory do? The second question. What this theory is all about? Surely this theory is all about raising voices for the rights and concerns of people with disability, that is PWD. That's fair enough, but it does much more than that. It provides PWDs with counter narrative against the discourses that are steeped in ableism. मतलब ये हुआ कि ये मुतबादिल बयानियाँ फराहम करती है उन बयानियों से जो कि बनते हैं थ्रू एबलिज्म, जिसकी हम तशरीह अभी थोड़ी देर में करेंगे अगला. At the same time, it tries to reclaim the identity for the PWD based upon their embodied experience or lived experience, and thereby getting back a valid identity based upon a valid subjectivity. Right? Now this will become very crucial as we shall proceed, because when you talk about the identity that is generally imposed upon the PWD, it is imposed upon us because, as you know, being a PWD myself, I actually not only consider this theory to be just a part of epistemology, that is the way I have my input. Epistemology is the science of knowledge, and I'm using it the way I have my input. Okay? It's not an epistemology for me. It's a very closely felt, heartfelt experience for me. So, yeah, I actually feel, who founded this disability thing? Because my next point will be covered by that. Who founded this thing? We are told that a group of war veterans in United Kingdom who sustained a lot of physical injury resulting in their physical handicaps or sensory impairments, they became activists. Those activists saw that there were a lot of things which were unjustly denied to the people with disabilities, and there was no representation that they had in the forums, in the institutions, in the organization which made policies for them, which determined as to what was good and what was not so good for them, which actually sort of were at the helm of affairs, and there was no representation of people with disability. So everything came through, again, the ableist filter. So people such as Mike Oliver, Colin Barnes, David Mercer, Paul Longmore, these are some of the interesting, some of the popular initial figures who took up this challenge, and they actually met officials, met politicians, made speeches, made manifestos, held gatherings. They were politically very active, and it was because of their efforts that we were able to have a law passed in 1990 named what was it? ADA, Americans with Disability Act. It was followed by a lot of legislation which paved the way for the rights to be obtained by the PWDs. Okay. And that actually also generated disability theory. What was the pre-disability theory intellectual and discursive landscape? What was the ambience in which this theory enters and made difference? There is a disability theorist called Tanya Tishkovsky. She tells us that before the advent of disability theory, there were two major branches of knowledge, namely medical science and sociology, which considered disability to be a valid field of inquiry, of which medical science treated disability as pathology, and sociology dealt with disability as deviance. Both of these words, as you can well imagine, again gave an outsider's perspective. They gave us what disability looks like from without, okay, a deviance and a pathology. So the result was that before the advent of disability studies, the disabled did try to raise voice, but whatever they said was considered either symptomatic of or adjustment to or coping with disability. Whatever they said was pegged to a single physical attribute, namely the disability. So from putting up makeup to delivering speeches, from writing books to getting dropped from the school roll, from laughing to weeping, everything which the disabled did was attributed to disability. So that was the narrowest that it could get. That's where the disability study came in. Now here in this milieu, a social critic, a social critic advised the people with disability. Tell us, sir, what was his advice? Yes.
So it was Greenwood, and he said, the onus is upon the cripples to integrate themselves into the society, which does its best to accommodate the disabled, who have no constructive role to play in the social progress or development. Since the disabled receive so much from society in terms of psychological or material support, it is up to the disabled to return something in equal measure to the benevolent society. He goes on to say, well, the first step in this regard is that the disabled must accept the fact that their physical presence is a huge discomfort for others. And then he argues that the disabled are not called upon to give up their lives of comfort and material ease because the society is more than willing to bestow on them as gifts. However, the disabled must avoid expressing bitterness and exposing their pain because it unnerves those who are ready to extend their help and cooperation.
Good advice, Anna. You see, this advice tells us 3 or 4 things, and I'm just going to rush through those things. The guy is trying to tell us, be grateful for what you have. Don't ask for more. Don't whine like crybabies. Be yourself. Keep on living that secluded life. Because if you would raise voices, that will be tantamounting to upsetting your benefactors. Okay? So that's not a good response. You must behave. A very good sentence. Okay. Behave yourself, he says. Okay? And if you don't, you are, in a way, being ungrateful, you are being thankless. Now, another important thing that you are about to listen to is, now this was an everyday sort of a parlance. This was an everyday discourse. Now let's see what was happening at an intellectual level. And here again, one of my very favorite literary theorists, disability literary theorists, Georgina Cleage, who herself is visually challenged. And her book, Sight Unseen, I strongly recommend. Okay? So this excerpt is from that. So please, let's just hear that.
Cleage clearly sums up this literary and critical tendency. The hypothetical blind man has long played a useful, though thankless role as a prop for theories of consciousness. He is the patient subject of endless thought experiments where the experience of the world through four senses can be compared to the experience of the world through five. He is understood to lead a hermit-like existence so far at the margins of the society that he has never heard this visual terminology before the philosophers bring it up. Part of the emotional baggage he hauls around with him comes from other cultural representations of blindness, such as Oedipus and the many biblical figures whose sight is withdrawn by the wrathful God of the Old Testament or restored by the Redeemer of the New. His primary function is to highlight the importance of sight and to elicit a frisson of awe and pity which promotes gratitude among the sighted theorists for the vision they possess.
Again, you see the move that this statement tells us were being made. Philosophers such as Descartes and John Locke, what they did was that in order to bring home any philosophical point, they disembodied blindness, turned it into an abstract concept, and from that abstract concept, they came up with their thought experiments. Thus, blindness was not a lived experience, but abstracted to become a kind of a symbol of human condition. Okay. The second thing that this quotation tells us is that there was a prevalent belief amongst the normates. Now that's a term for normal people, which is actually coined by Rosemary Garland Thompson. So I might end up using this term over and over again. So normates thought that blind people live so far apart from life that their life is more like the life of a hermit. Okay, who does not know what rainbow is, visual terminology, right? What rainbow is, what colors are, what spring is, unless philosophers bring it to him. Okay, he's so far apart from life. And lastly, his primary function, wherever he appeared, here he means the blind person, in literature or wherever. His primary function was to elicit a frisson. A frisson is a very good word. It's a goosebump moment, sensational moment, excitement moment, frisson of awe from sighted people कि शुक्र है हमारी sight गई नहीं, हम इस अजाब में मुब्तला नहीं हुए. So that is the primary function for a blind person wherever he appeared in literature before this discussion started on. Now, let's just get into it. Before I move on, I would like you to just, because of course all of us know intuitively what disability is. But let's give a dictionary definition of what disability is so that we may build our discussion from that. So let's hear the dictionary definition.
So Oxford English Dictionary defines it as one, lack of ability to discharge any office or function, inability, incapacity, weakness. And B is an instance of lack of ability. Number 2 is a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. For example, the fact or state of having such condition. And then third is incapacity in the eye of the law or created by the law, a restriction framed to prevent any person or class of persons from sharing in duties or privileges which would otherwise be open to them.
So this definition tells us what? Every definition is steeped in negation. Steeped, deficit, deficiency, inability, incapacity. How far would you disable a disabled person further? Incapacity, deficiency, lack. Okay? Now this is no coincidence. These definitions have come from what we knew as the medical model of disability. The medical model perceived that disability was a biological condition. It was a physical phenomenon. It was a personal tragedy. It was an individual predicament. Okay? It was a noose that was tied around an individual's neck. So, it was up to him to sort of cope with his life. And the remedy was that there must be some cure. The disability must be fixed. Actually, they equated disability with illness. So wherever there was illness, it needed a remedy. It needed to be cured, or an ill person needed to be rehabilitated. So this was a paradigm, known to the humanity from time immemorial. Okay? I mean, उसके लिए भी जरूरी था कि आप disabled person के साथ relationship ना build करें, nurse करें उसको. Okay? Nursing out of his situation, of his predicament. There is no need for building relationship. अब चूंकि लंबा भी हो सकते हैं, इसमें से एक्चुअली यही कोई था उसका फॉर्मूला सेनेका का एंगर मैनेजमेंट पे. वो कहता था कि ना लाइक व्हाट, हाँ, प्रिवेंशन, इंटरवेंशन एंड रिपेयर, ये होना चाहिए कि रिलेशनशिप में विद एन डिसेबल्ड. प्रिवेंट करें किसी गड़बड़ को होने से, इंटरवीन करेगा तो गड़बड़ हो जाए, रिपेयर करेगा तो नुकसान हो जाए. ओके, सो इससे ज्यादा आगे जाने की, बात करने की, इंटरेस्ट शेयर करने की, रिलेशनशिप बनाने की कोई जरूरत नहीं. एंड देयर इज अ क्रिटिक ऑफ मेडिकल मॉडल. लेट्स hear that from Sasmir, and it's a very interesting critique.
Part of the problem with the word disability is that it immediately suggests an inability to see or hear or walk or do other things that many of us take for granted. But what of people who cannot feel or talk about their feelings or manage their feelings in constructive ways? What of people who aren't able to form close and strong relationships? And people who cannot find fulfillment in their lives, or those who have lost hope, who live in disappointment and bitterness and find in life no joy, no love. These, it seems to me, are the real disabilities.
So if you are calling, if somebody cannot walk, physical handicap, and if you are calling if somebody cannot see, visual impairment, why don't you have a name for someone who can't express himself fully, who can't build relationships, who can't respond to the emotional, side of others, who cannot really feel the other's pain? Why don't you have a word for it? And the word should be in line with the definitions of disability. Because here again you are having a lack. Here again you are having a deficit. So the difference which disability people made, that is disability theorists made, was the introduction of social model of disability as opposed to the medical model. Now social model of, before I get into it, you must have heard a sentence by Simone de Beauvoir, a very famous feminist. One is not born but becomes a woman. It was second sex. इसकी किताब थी जिसमें से उन्होंने कहा था कि one is not born but becomes a woman. I mean, biologically you could be a female, but woman you become through social practices or cultural practices. In the same way, social model believe that you could be physically impaired, but you become disabled through the dictates of the society. Society closes in upon you in terms of giving you opportunities. It erects barriers, attitudinal, social, economic, political, definitional. You just name it. Okay? So it is because of these barriers that a physically impaired person becomes disabled. And I wanted to give you a hang of how basically society disables through a concrete example. Now, Wittgenstein once actually made it clear. Somebody asked, what is meaning? He said, meaning is use. When you ask the meaning of a word, what you are actually asking is how this word is used. So let's see how the word blindness is used in Carter Dictionary. So let's listen.
So in Carter World English Dictionary contains no fewer than 13 entries for the adjectival form, blind. 1. Unable to see. Unable to see permanently or temporarily.
ये तो होगी blindness की सादा definition. अब आगे सुनो.
2. Unable to recognize. Unwilling or unable to understand something. As in blind to the consequences. Number 3. Uncontrollable. So extreme and uncontrollable as to make somebody behave irrationally. For example, blind rage, blind fear. Number 4. Unquestioning. Not based on fact and usually total and unquestioning. Blind prejudice, such as. Number 5 is lacking awareness, a blind stupor. Then, number 6, not giving a clear view. Not giving a clear view and possibly dangerous. For example, a blind corner. And then it's without doors or windows. Without doors or windows or not enclosing an open space. Number 9 is closed at one end. Closed off at one end, a blind, unused tunnel. And then number 10 is done without looking. Done without looking or while unable to see. For example, blind-faced pests. And then 11 is done unprepared. Done without preparation or the relevant information. For example, a blind presentation. And then number 12 is with information concealed for unprejudiced result. Used to describe scientific experiments or similar evaluations in which information is withheld in order to obtain an unprejudiced result. And that in botany is about prompts, about working point.
So you see, after the first definition, we depart. We depart into cultural connotations. Blindness as unruliness, as craziness, as unpreparedness, as dangerous. Wow. Right? And then you ask, why is it that the people do not have the kind of interaction that they must with people who are disabled in one form or the other? Because you load the meaning of the word that you have to describe someone with so much social negativity, so much social danger, manners, so on and so forth, right? How can you then expect society to behave otherwise, right? So that's a very important takeaway of disabilities here. Now that leads us to another concept called stigma. One of the ways society disables is through the concept of stigma. Erving Goffman, a very leading sociologist whose book is considered to be very seminal and it's very good read, by the way. It's a good read. It's called Stigma, the Notes on the Management of Spoiled Identity. Okay? So before talking about stigma, let's have definition of stigma. What is stigma, sir? Stigma. Okay. Stigma is उसकी definition निकल गई है बीच में. but what I can remember from my memory is that stigma is an attribute by the society which sort of singles someone out as being odd or irregular. Okay? In other words, it's a basically undesired difference. Stigma was originated, the concept was originated by the Greeks. वो करते ये थे कि they would, in order to single out someone who they thought was morally defective, a slave or a criminal, they would burn or cut into his skin some sign, and the insignia would advertise the signifier wherever he would go, wherever he would go, okay, as someone who is to be avoided because he has been socially outcast, he has been socially ostracized. तीन तरह के स्टिग्मेटिक लोग होते थे अकॉर्डिंग टू गॉर्मेंट. पहला फिजिकल, दूसरा रिलीजियस जो मतलब उसके इंजेक्शन से पूरा नहीं करता, तीसरा आई मीन सिटीजन, एज अ सिटीजन जिसके सिविक ड्यूटीज जिसने पूरी नहीं की. इन आर फॉर आर एलिमेंट्स इज द फिजिकल साइड ऑफ लॉ. ये कॉन्सेप्ट आज भी जिंदा है. सो लाइक द ग्रीक इंसिग्निया, visibility advertises because it is very much seen, it's a bodily sign, it's visible. It very much advertises that the bearer is somehow not equal to the ordinary citizens. ठीक है? अच्छा, फिर उसका जो रिजल्ट है वो भी बड़ा ही वैसे ही होता था जैसे स्टिग्मेटाइज फील करते थे. मसलन I tell you what, I was talking to again Hebron once. मुझे बात किस पे करनी चाहिए? फोको के न्यूरोसिटिज्म पे या डिसेबिलिटी स्टडीज पे? हालांकि there is no comparison. Disability studies is way too close to me. Why was I hesitant talking about it? Why did not I have the courage to talk about it? It was like talking about myself. And I did not wish that the self-knowledge should be shared for so low a price. No price is not a good word. For just this much. I just did not have the courage to do it. Because all my life I've been sort of filled with fear and fury. जो कि मैं चाहता हूँ कि यहाँ पे जब भी सुनेंगे कि स्टिग्मेटाइज्ड पर्सन की फीलिंग होती क्या है. एंड यू कैन सी इन लिटरेचर galore. ये हमने रात को एक्चुअली पढ़ रहे थे एक नॉवेल और उसमें हमने सोचा था कि ये that condition serves our purpose for stigmatized identity. So let's listen to it.
It was a character.
ये excellent.
Who was blind in one eye and he also limped.
So, is that fury? Fury and fear. These are the fuels that drive me. Mixed and equal measure. Fury at being what I am not.
Fear of being found out for what I am.
See, this is amazing. Fury at not being what I am. And fear of being found out who I am. Right? That is stigma for you. So, because as I say, I just am rushing through a few concepts. Another very interesting concept that does us in, that really strikes a very forceful blow, is the concept of normality. Many of us may have never really thought about it, the concept of normalcy. But I tell you what, it's a hugely troublesome concept for us. So, all of us can understand that we live every part of our life according to some norm. So we rank our intelligence according to some standard. We rank our body weight, our color, our height according to certain normal standards. So everything that we do it according to an assumed norm that actually creates a benchmark which defines as to who is going to be regular and who is going to be deviant. We are so afraid to get out of that narrow, calculated window. डरना शुरू हो जाता है. हमारा प्राइमरी मकसद होता है सबकी तरह नजर आना, एवरेज नजर आना. How amazing, right? We wish to look like average people. We cannot afford the sort of burden, the load of the odd. इसी मामले में भी हम नॉर्मल से बाहर होते हुए
डर महसूस करते हैं. Again, literature is full of such examples on that. अब एक कॉमन मिसकंसेप्शन कि नॉर्मल का स्टैंडर्ड हमेशा से एग्जिस्ट करता रहा है, जिसके अगेंस्ट डिविएंस मेजर होती थी हमेशा. ऐसा नहीं. The word normal, as Leonard Davis tells us, came into its present semantic use after the industrial revolution. इससे पहले नॉर्मल का लफ्ज निकला नॉर्मा से. इसका मतलब होता था परपेंडिकुलर, और इसका दूसरा मतलब होता था कारपेंटर स्क्वायर. एक कारपेंटर का मेजरिंग इंस्ट्रूमेंट होता था. अच्छा, इससे पहले जो कॉन्सेप्ट था नॉर्मल से, दैट वाज एन आइडियल ऑर्डर इमेज which is actually exemplified by the tradition of nude Venuses. इसकी एक मिसाल आपको मैं देता हूँ क्योंकि इस कॉन्सेप्ट की बड़ी अहमियत है. तो गए वक्तों में एक हिस्टोरियन देयर वाज Plinius, Plinius, Plinius. वो बताता है कि देयर वाज एन आर्टिस्ट whose name was Zeuxis, Zeuxis. वो पेंट करना चाह रहा था एफ्रोडाइटी की पेंटिंग, the goddess of love. Now, in order to paint that goddess, what he did was that he did not ask one woman from the island Crotona. उसने कहा सब खूबसूरत खवातीन इकट्ठी हो गया, एक एक करके उसने उनको देखा, and from each he selected one beautiful limb or organ, so as to come up with a figure of a beautiful goddess befitting Aphrodite. इस बात का मतलब क्या? इस बात का मतलब ये कि आइडियल लेवल ऑब्टेन करना, फिजिकल आइडियल लेवल ऑब्टेन करना एक बंदे की बात ही नहीं. ओके, यानी इट कैन बी पॉसिबल if you are a god, it can be obtained at a divine level, but beauty and therefore normalcy, therefore physical vigor, physical health is a diffuse concept. किसी के पास कुछ ठीक है, किसी के पास कुछ खराब है, किसी के पास कुछ बेहतर है, किसी के पास कुछ बदतर है वगैरह वगैरह. इट्स अ डिफ्यूज, ये स्कैटर्ड कॉन्सेप्ट है. यस. तो वो ये कहता है कि ये ब्यूटी, फिजिकल हेल्थ एक बंदे की बस की बात ही नहीं है. So by this token, all of us are to one degree or the other elementary disabled. रल मिलके हम बनाते हैं अपनी एबिलिटी. ठीक है, सारे मिलके फिर एक वो बनता है जो कि है फुल फॉर्म. ओके, इसके बाद एक स्टैटिस्टिशियन था whose name was Adolf Quetelet. ये फ्रेंच स्टैटिस्टिशियन था जिसने छापा डाला. इसने किया ये कि लॉ ऑफ एरर को जो कि एस्ट्रोनॉमर्स यूज करते थे, इंसानों को यूज करते थे. लॉ ऑफ एरर ये था कि व्हाइल यू आर trying to locate a star, you plot all the sightings that you have of the same star, और उनका जो एरर था उससे एवरेज निकाल. इसने उसी एवरेज जो एरर की एवरेज थी उसको उसने एट्रीब्यूट किया था टू कम अप विद एन एब्स्ट्रैक्ट इमेज ऑफ एन आइडियल ह्यूमन बीइंग. इसकी ये फिजिकल एट्रीब्यूट्स होने चाहिए. He was born in 1796 and I think died in 1847. Adolf Quetelet. इसने फर्दर जो काम किया था वो ये किया था कि इसने ना एक कॉन्सेप्ट किया था लॉन्ग मोइन का, मतलब एवरेज मैन का. इसका एवरेज मैन जो था वो कॉम्बिनेशन था जहाँ पे ट्रेजेडी स्टार्ट होती है. अगर आपके पास एवरेज फिजिकल एट्रीब्यूट्स हैं तो इसका मतलब आपके पास एवरेज मोरल एट्रीब्यूट्स भी होंगे. यानी he associated the normalcy with morality. Okay, and therefore made it absolutely necessary for everybody कि वो दुआ करें कि मैं नॉर्मल रहूं क्योंकि मैंने अपने मॉरलिटी साउंड कंसीडर होना. ठीक है, अब इसकी कोटेशन है, लेट्स हियर दैट.
An individual who epitomized in himself at a given time all the qualities of the average man would represent at once all the greatness, beauty and goodness of that being.
ठीक है, तो कौन नहीं चाहेगा फिर नॉर्मल होना? Because you not only want to be physically normal, you want to be considered as morally normal as well. And now we come to our biggest issue, that is ableism. What is ableism? ऐसे करते हैं इसकी मैं डेफिनेशन पहले सुन लेते हैं, इससे बाद में निकलते हैं.
So Krishna, who defines it as ableism as consisting of ways of thinking, social discourses, powerful socio-political institutions, practices and social relationships which presume able-bodiedness as a norm and by doing so construct persons with disabilities
as marginalized
and largely invisible.
others. And then was Emerson and perceive ableism as a doctrine which falsely presumes that impairments are inherently moral.
Ableism basically is an umbrella term for a mindset, जो कि आज से नहीं है, शुरू से ही. Ableism is a mindset, जिससे कल्चर जन्म लेता है, जिससे आर्ट जन्म लेता है, जिससे जुबान जन्म लेती है, रसूमात जन्म लेती है, जिससे समाज जन्म लेता है एक खत पे, एक लाइन पे. And the line that is drawn for good is between able-bodiedness and disability. हर वो चीज जो लाइन के दूसरी तरफ है, that is towards disability, it is inherently bad. पहली तो बात ये करता है कि ये ableism basically defines some attributes and call it species typical. अगर तुम इंसान हो, ठीक है, तो you must have these attributes, and if you don't, you could still be a human being, but a little less, okay, but a little less than a full-blooded, full-grown human being. अच्छा, अब ये concept आज का नहीं. Greeks had it. They called it arete, A-R-E-E-E. Arete was an embodiment, ideal embodiment, जिसमें a person who would achieve that would have a lot of physical vitality, moral, perfection, right? Physical flawlessness, strength of character, so on and so forth. अच्छा, अब ये जो innate थी, it would lead to another concept called eudaimonia, E-U-D-E-M-O-N-I-A, eudaimonia, that is flourishing life. तो हर शरीर की ये ड्यूटी होती थी कि through achieving elite, he or she should achieve eudaimonia, ताकि वो perfection तस्वुर हो जाए, ठीक है? अच्छा, वो जो basically कभी भी अचीव नहीं कर पाते थे due to physical inability or deficiency, उनके बारे में हमारा प्लेटो क्या कहते हैं रिपब्लिक? Let's listen.
Plato, the acclaimed father of Western philosophy, invites the wise men of Greece to legislate in your state. It will provide treatment
For those of your citizens whose
physical and psychological
constitution is good, as for the others,
it will lead the unhealthy to die.
Wow.
and those whose
Psychological constitution is incurably corrupt. It will put to death. That seems to be
the
the
best thing for both the
individual sufferer and for society.
मार दो इन्हें, because they can never achieve a reach. Okay, they are eternally damned. So better it is for the society to get rid of them. If that was not enough, let's turn to the Middle Ages. अच्छा, उसमें concept होता था, उसको कहते थे imago Dei. शायद Hebron साहब would know that. Imago Dei, the image, the true image of God.
Man is created in the image of God.
Exactly, the man is created in the image of God. अच्छा, true image of God कौन? The one who was created, the one who could not, think straight, right? For a true image, because you are talking about the image of God, right? God who is the sign, symbol of perfection. So the body who should be imaging it should be perfect itself. लिहाजा again हम इस गिनती में भी नहीं. इसका इशू ये था कि इसको perfection चाहिए थी for the fullest expression of God. For the body to be a fullest expression of God, तो जरूरी था कि it should be flawless, impeccable. Okay. नतीजा इसका जरूर वही निकलना था जो फिर निकला. In the 20th century, people decided that in order to safeguard the society from the bad stock, okay, it is important that eugenic practices should be put in place. Eugenics. It was basically a way of purifying or keeping the society purified by sterilizing people who could be disabled so that they may not reproduce. But is there a definition that you just need?
So Rosemary Garland Thompson believes that through eugenic practices,
the Western nation states tried to keep their geographical and physiological border intact.
They accomplished this aim through the use of means such as forced sterilization of the sanctioned community, compiling records of so-called genetically inferior family lines, passing anti-miscegenation laws which encourage the physically able group to flourish and
Discourage the so-called defective group from thriving and dividing the society into intellectual categories such as feeble-minded and mentally sound.
Now they just अच्छा आप अगर ये ख्याल है कि ये अच्छा और आपको ये भी बता दूं there was a program called T4 it was by Nazis हमने Holocaust बहुत सुनी है T4 तक कोई नाम नहीं मिला T4 was as brutal a Holocaust but this time it was not of Jews it was people with disabilities इसका नाम था T4 okay so that is how eugenic practices got hold of the early 20th century अगर ये आपका ख्याल है खत्म हो गया तो अब इसकी फॉर्म क्या है अब इसकी फॉर्म है प्रीनेटल टेस्टिंग अब इसकी फॉर्म ये है कि आप पहले से तय कर लो बाय एग्जामिनिंग द फीटस कि होने वाली रूह कंप्लीट होगी कि बदरू होगी ठीक है यानी यू एक्चुअली डिसाइडेड बिफोर हैंड बाय एग्जामिनिंग मेडिकली ये मार्शल सेक्सटन है and she is actually speaking for feminist ये feminist है वो देखें बात क्या कर रहे हैं
So she says the quality and enjoyment of life is very inferior.
That raising a child with a disability is a wholly undesirable experience, that selective aversion will save mothers from the burdens of raising disabled children, and that ultimately we as a society have the means and the right to decide who is better off not being born.
So now let's just move on as to what kind of language issues there are for representing people with disabilities. I know I'm just running behind the clock, so therefore I'm just quickening up. I hope I'm actually running behind the clock. Okay. So basically, language issues. Regarding language, Blaska in 1992 wrote in one of his articles, there are three kinds of languages which are normally used for the disabled people. One is disability first language, known as blind man, blind woman, blind king, deaf person, because here you have disability as being mentioned first. And then there is a person first language, which is considered more, in favorable terms. It is of course when you say people with disability instead of disabled people, okay? And then there is a disability neutral language, okay? Which just talks about disability only when it is required. You just talk about man and woman in normal terms, but then when there actually occurs a need, then you talk about the disability. Now in literature, both in fiction and non-fiction, there is a tendency to talk in dead metaphors. But that's another very important takeaway that you must really have. A dead metaphor is which actually loses its metaphorical imagery and becomes a regular part of language. आपको लगता ही नहीं कि कोई metaphor है. आपको लगता है शुरू से ही लफ्ज़ है. ठीक है? So let's listen to a bit of an inventory of such words. Let's listen to it. ये मैंने again starting with कैसे?
So still we say colorblind, deaf to the call of justice, suffering from historical amnesia, blind to structural oppression, limping under the weight of inequality, and amputate itself, simply crazy, subject to colonial aphasia, agnosia, even alexia. Nothing but a deformed economy made to fit a crippled economy, devastatingly disabled. What compels such impairment rhetoric? It is obviously steeped in ableism punctuated with medical overtone.
Yes, exactly. And we actually have some more quotations. अभी हम इसको थोड़ा bypass करेंगे. Because ये अच्छा जोसेफ कॉनरेड का नॉवल है लॉर्ड जिम. अब उसमें कोई डिसेबिलिटी की वो बात नहीं कर रहा. लेकिन वो वर्ड्स जब यूज करेगा ना किसी भी नेगेटिविटी को सामने लाने के लिए, तो he would always use impairment rhetorics. वैसे उसको भी जरा हो ही जाए.
So Conrad says, a dance of lame, blind, mute thoughts.
अभी देख लें. He's not talking about people.
A world of awful cripples. he comported himself in that clatter as though he had been stone deaf. There was nothing but the cripple about him. A broken figure hovered in crippled little jumps. He was made blind and deaf and without pity, a blind belief in the righteousness of his will against all mankind. They were erring men whom suffering had made blind to right and wrong. You dismal cripples, you unmoved like a deaf man.
See, so this is the dead metaphor. This is a language consisting of dead metaphors. Okay? It's not talking about disabled people, it's not talking about disability, it's just talking about discourses and then using this impairment reference. I would like to know how much time do we have?
I think we should move to questions.
Okay, in that case.
Conclude.
Okay, in that case, let me tell you that there is a concept called aesthetic nervousness. This is a very important concept. Aesthetic nervousness takes place when a non-disabled person meets for the first time a disabled guy. Because a lot of data needs to be processed during a very short period of time. Right? उसमें ये समझ नहीं आती नॉन डिसेबल्ड को कि क्या पूछे, क्या बात करें, कितनी आवाज में बात करें, कौन से लफ्ज, ये एक क्वेश्चन का कॉन्सेप्ट है और वो लिटरेचर में बहुत जगह पे यू कैन एक्चुअली अप्लाई दैट, राइट, जिसमें ये पता लगता है कि पहली मुलाकात जो होती है ना बिटवीन ए डिसेबल्ड पर्सन एंड ए नॉन डिसेबल्ड पर्सन, इट इज फुल ऑफ वो उसको कहते हैं कि जो डोमिनेंट प्रोटोकॉल्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन एंड रिप्रेजेंटेशन है वो शॉर्ट सर्किट हो जाते हैं. ठीक है, because you don't know which thing you are supposed to say and which not. एक और कॉन्सेप्ट है जिसका है जो है बेसिकली नैरेटिव प्रोसेसेस. ये इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट है, इसलिए मैं कहते हैं कि मैं यहाँ से शेयर करूँ. नैरेटिव प्रोसेसेस ये पेश किया था शेल स्नाइडर ने एंड डेविड मिचेल ने. प्रोसेसेस क्या होता है? प्रोसेसेस ये होता है कि when you have to replace your organic limb by an artificial limb, उस ऑपरेशन को प्रोसेसेस कहते हैं. तो नैरेटिव प्रोसेसेस क्या होता है? वो ये होता है कि जब कोई राइटर ये डिसाइड करता है टू यूज डिसेबिलिटी एज ए मास्टर ट्रोप, ठीक है, इन ऑर्डर टू एनर्जाइज हिज नैरेटिव, in order to enhance its representational potential, its disruptive strength or its analytical insight. ये 4 stages में वो कहता होता है. पहली स्टेज में राइटर ये बताता है कि कितना मुश्किल है डिसेबल्ड लाइफ गुजारना. That inaugurates the initial act. फिर वो ये बताता है कि कितना मिस्टीरियस है ऐसी जिंदगी गुजारना. That solidifies the need to tell a story about it. तीसरे में वो ये कहता है कि वो ना causes and consequences पे आ जाते हैं ऑफ डिसेबिलिटी. ये थी causes, ये हैं consequences. फिर चौथे में वो करते ये कि या डिस्कार्ड कर देते हैं या इरेडिकेट कर देते हैं या रिहेबिलिटेट कर देते हैं या क्योर कर देते हैं डिसेबल पीपल. तो ये एक तरह का वो स्ट्रक्चरल नरेशन है जो कि बेसिकली पीपल डू दैट. फिर लास्टली 3-4 कई वैसे तो है बेसिकली जिसमें ना डिसेबिलिटी नॉर्मली प्रेजेंट होती है लिटरेचर. एक तो है नॉमिनल, ये मैंने तकरीबन आधे से ज़्यादा प्रेजेंटेशन अपनी मुझे छोटी पड़ रही है बिकॉज आई जस्ट सेड कि मेरे से ना आई जस्ट कांट रियली काफ़ी होता. अच्छा, पहला है एज सेकेंडरी गेन, डिसेबिलिटी एज सेकेंडरी गेन. दूसरा है डिसेबिलिटी एज ट्रेजेडी. तीसरा है डिसेबिलिटी एज फूलिशनेस. चौथा है डिसेबिलिटी एज इवल. पांचवा है डिसेबिलिटी एज वर्च्यू, एज पनिशमेंट, as abnormality, as purification and as symbol or matter. हम इस सेशन का इख्तिताम करेंगे by listening to a poem which is called the Elegy of Ableism. So I would afterwards be here for the questions. So let's listen to the poem and thank you so much.
So it's Elegy of Ableism. They told me the point must walk straight. No stumble, no pause, no cane clicking its stubborn rhythm against the marble floors of form. They said, the sentence must see clearly, must not grope for words, like braille across a darkened page. It must shine not shimmer, not strain, just shine. They measured breadth as if lungs were rulers of meaning, as if halting speech were a flaw in the tongue and not the music of survival. They hold it progress, the smoothing out, the correction of crooked letters, the erasure of tremor, the cure that leaves a quiet grave where a voice once lived. I have seen poets translate pain into posture, bend metaphors into prosthetics, make symmetry a god, and I have wanted to break their mirror. For I have known beauty limping through hospital corridors, intelligence blinking through an uncooperative eye, grace housed in wheelchairs, and language that breathes in fragments. Each pause a pulse of resistance. Let the poem now fall, uneven, breathing hard. Let it stutter, sign, hum, and crawl. Let it remember every voice that was revised out of anthology for sounding too alive. Let this elegy not mourn the disabled, but the blindness of a world that thought perfection was the hill.
Beautiful.